We are happy to welcome you all to this information, which is first starting with a short introduction to the sector and some key topical issues we have here. Then our colleague Bernard Lombard will go through the key statistics in 2019. Then another colleague from Cepi, Ulrich Leberle, will inform you about the key recycling performance statistics. And then finally, we will have an extra program to give you an overview of what happened in the COVID-19 confinement situation to our sector in 2020. And then all this should not take more than 30 minutes, and then there's another 30 minutes left for questions and answers. So if you please can keep yourself muted until we go through these short introductions, the first 30 minutes, so that we have no disturbing background noises. That would be very good. You will receive at noon the press release about the statistics, and also this publication that you see in the picture here, the key statistics publication that is always coming out in this time of the year, every year about the previous year. And then later in the afternoon, also recording of this press conference will be available on the YouTube channel, and you will get the link to that too. So my name is Jori Ringman. I'm Director General of Cepi since last summer, and I'm very happy to go through first general information about Cepi and then some topical issues we have. First of all, we believe that Cepi is quite unique. So pulp and paper industry in Europe is quite unique. We are in the focal point of bio industries, in focal point of circular economy, and in the focal point of digital advancement of manufacturing in Europe. There are of course many industries that are more digital than us. There are probably some that could be as circular as we are, and of course many other sectors that are also bio, but we believe that we are quite unique in being all that at the same time and advancing in all those areas at the same time. We represent almost 500 individual companies in Europe, and they operate 891 production sites across Europe, and then they are actually quite widely spread in most of the EU countries. We have a direct employment of 182,000 people, which is the direct employment, and of course indirectly many more. We are having a share of 22% of the global production in our sector, which is still good, and this is something that is then of course reflected a bit further in the statistics that you will see more details about that. We also increasingly position ourselves as a part of the forest-based industrial ecosystem. You know that now the European Commission is changing language a bit, and there's no more so much talking about individual sectors or value chains, but it's the networks of the value chains that are there as industrial ecosystems. And we position ourselves as part of the forest-based industrial ecosystem that is of course linked to the most other ecosystems in Europe. And what is so remarkable about this forest-based industry ecosystem is that it actually is really the cornerstone of manufacturing in Europe. 1 in 5 companies in EU manufacturing are in this forest-based industries ecosystem. I would like to also highlight a bit why we do all this work in statistics. First of all, Cepi communication is fact-based and science-based. So we never say something that we can't back up with clear facts, and that is mostly coming from our statistics. And Bernard will explain why we believe later in his part, why we believe that our statistics are very reliable and why they are very solid and actually best in class. I don't think there's any other industry association or industry sector in Europe that does as thorough work with statistics as we do. We are also offering this data to the policymakers in Brussels, because also the regulation requires accurate and updated data. So this is very important. We also have many stakeholders that are needing this data, and we are happy to share a lot of data with stakeholders and of course media as well. So when you write reports and articles, you need to have the facts right, and we are happy to help with that. Increasing part of Cepi work is working on international trade cases, and for that we also need to be equipped with very good data to monitor the situation and make the analysis that are also the foundation of then trade disputes. Also, our companies need data and business intelligence to support their strategy and investments and their own decision making, so that they have visibility beyond their own companies. And this is again an important part where Cepi can help a lot. But maybe additionally, I could add that Cepi needs this data also for the old-fashioned good reason that what you measure, you can manage. So we are driving the sector to more sustainable future since long time, and an important part of that is to be able to measure where we are, where we came from, and where we are making the progress to. And then this is of course something really, really important, and you can see it may be reflected in these key numbers here in this slide. So for example, we can with confidence say that 74% of the wood that is bought for our sector comes from certified value chains. And then this is not nothing. It's actually quite remarkable in Europe, where the ownership of forest is very scattered and atomized to the small holdings. So to have the whole value chain, the whole of chain of custody intact is often the challenge for us. We also know from the statistics that we have this share of 22% of the global paper production, and we know also that we are net exporters. So there's of course a lot of materials coming in, a lot of materials going out, but the net is on benefit of the European production. So 22% of our production is exported. We know also that we are big investors in Europe, in the European economy, already before the crisis. So we, on average, invest twice as much as the manufacturing sectors in Europe do, and this is good news for the EU economy. We have 20 billion euros added to the European economy every year. We know that we are best in class in climate change mitigation. We have reduced 48% of the CO2 emissions since 1990, or if you want to have the baseline of 2005, it's minus 24%, which is both actually quite remarkable numbers. And then I think we are in the front line of any of the industries there. We still increase the share of renewable energy in our production, and it's 60% at the moment. We also, since 20 years, have been setting recycling targets for ourselves for paper recycling, and at the moment we stand at 72%, and like I mentioned, my colleague Ulrich will tell you all details about that in a moment. Maybe to highlight to you is that in this year's key statistics report, we have a new feature, which is a little icon of a recycling symbol, because we are not only champions in paper recycling, we are multiple champions in circular economy. We recycle water, we recycle chemicals, we recycle residues. Increasingly, we share power and heat with many others in industrial symbiosis, and also there we are advancing a lot. So to make it easier for people to read where we are contributing to circular economy in Europe, we have added a little recycling symbol into the statistics so that you easier can detect it. And this is maybe not full outcome of what we can inform the readers about circularity, but it's the first year we introduced that feature there. Then I would like to go quickly to particular topics. And the first one is to highlight a study we did a few weeks ago, or published 2 years ago. We did it during the spring, but it was published a few weeks ago, on the contribution that we can do in climate mitigation with our products. There's a substitution effect when something made by our sectors, or more widely the forest-based industries, then it's substituting more high carbon products made from fossil materials and fossil sources. And second topic that I will go quickly through is a single-use plastics directive and how that might impact our sector and what our role in that is. So the study we did with an independent researcher, Peter Holmgren, has here the key findings. So we can provide integrated solutions to the global climate challenge on a very large scale. First of all, it's already established science that there's a net sink in the European forest that is the size of 447 million tons of CO2 equivalent every year. So this is the sink, so the amount of CO2 from the atmosphere that the forest absorb every year and transform to carbon storage. And for those who are not professionals in climate change language, then please be careful. The sink is the advancement you make every year, and it's not to be confused with the permanent storage that is in the forest. And the storage is actually much, much higher. So this is only the annual increment of that storage, the sink. So sometimes there's alarmistic reports about how the sink is reducing. So it's this year less than it was last year, or it's bigger this year than it was the year before. Whatever it goes, it typically has a fluctuation. So it's a bit like when you're driving your car, sometimes you go slower, sometimes you go faster, but you keep advancing every year. So the sink is the advancement of how much we add to the permanent storage of carbon in the forest. So please be careful, don't confuse the sink with the storage. Then another established fact is the fossil emissions from our sector. And this is combined. It's not only paper and board industry and pulp industry, it's the whole forest-based industries fossil emissions, which is 51 million tons of CO2 every year. And of course, we have a lot of projects to reduce that, and you already saw that in our sector we have reduced it significantly in the past, and keep on doing that, of course. But then the new element is the substitution effect. So with our products, we can keep the fossil emissions in ground when instead of a fossil-based product, people choose a renewable product like paper or wood or furniture made of wood or whatever it is. And this is actually quite a significant number. It's 410 million tons of CO2 equivalent every year. So almost as big as the net sink in the forest. So the total amounts to roughly 20% of all fossil emissions in the European Union. So we have a huge contribution from a small sector. We have a huge contribution in climate change mitigation. And of course, this is the snapshot from 2018. And then we have, of course, a lot of possibilities to increase both the sink and the substitution potential from our sector. Just very quickly, I partly already touched this. So the forest sink is there, and we didn't change anything about it. It's established science, established reporting set in legislation that governments do every year. So that's the 447 million tons of sink, and then also carbon storage in long-lasting wood-based products like construction materials. Then this material substitution is the new element, and then it really is significant. And like I said, the 51%, which is our still the part where we are increasing the climate change and trying to reduce that part and going to climate neutrality is 51 million tons. And again, that's established science. Unlike many other climate change mitigation options and policies and methods that you could imagine and you have available, what is so fantastic about this substitution effect is that it's available here and now. People can today, when they consume something, they can choose if they take something that is renewable material from forest-based sources that has the substitution effect, or if they continue consuming the fossil-based materials. And this is immediate impact, and it's a significant impact, and that's actually quite empowering message that we can send to the consumers and maybe also the policymakers that are worried about the climate change, like we all are. So then you might ask yourself that what is the opportunities for pulp and paper industry to contribute in substitution effect? Well, one actually quite fascinating and growing area is textiles. There the substitution effect is huge, and we know that the synthetic fibers are also contributing to microplastics. So if it can be replaced by cellulose-based textiles, not only we keep the CO2 emissions at base, we also avoid the microplastics in water from people washing their clothes. So this is also something, but I would now go quickly through another area, which is packaging. Many people seem to have missed a recent study by Material Economics. So it's a small but very powerful consultancy that did the study that have maybe two conclusions that are very important when talking about the plastic versus cellulose-based or fiber-based packaging made of wood. First, as a renewable material, fiber is much easier to make it CO2 neutral. Like I mentioned, we still have some emissions from our sector, but we are working on to reduce that. In the little chart down there, you can see that to start with, we are already less than half of the impact. The baseline of this study was 2016. So we were, for packaging, having less than half of the carbon footprint compared to plastic packaging. But what is remarkable is that we still have possibilities to reduce it remarkably by 2050. Whereas for plastics, actually, it's not that easy. For the primary production of plastics, they might still come close to us, still not as good as fiber-based packaging, but since they have to increasingly go for recycling, and they no longer are allowed to burn the plastics, which they did in the past, their carbon footprint actually will increase. So this is the amazing story that by 2050, we have reduced our carbon footprint to nearly nothing, whereas in plastics, it's still in 2050 gonna be about 3 times as big or 2.5 times as big as our carbon footprint was 4 years ago. So it's actually quite remarkable results. The second thing is that, of course, we don't even dream of replacing all the plastics. Some plastics really has a place in the society and keep continue being used. But there's a significant amount of 4.5 million tons or 25% of current plastics that could be readily be replaced by paper and board without any compromise on functionality. And this is again coming from this material economic study. But there are some things happening in the regulation that might cause hiccups in this nice story that we had. And the first one is Single-Use Plastics Directive. So at the moment, we are waiting for the Commission to define in an implementation guideline how the Single-Use Plastics Directive will apply to paper and board or any materials that are in the scope of the directive. Why also to paper and board? Simply because, at least at the moment, also paper and board packaging materials or food service materials quite often contain a small amount of polymers as a coating. These coatings are used because they provide the necessary functionality and consumer and food safety, like all packaging do. Also, metal packaging have plastic coatings, glass packaging has plastic coatings and closures. So basically, everybody is relying on plastics to a small extent. Of course, if you use other materials with a small component of plastics, you already reduce the plastic compared to having a full plastic article. So already it's a good thing, but it's not full answer yet. So that's a situation we have where we are waiting for this guidance document from the Commission early in the autumn to understand how it will apply to our sector. And we, on our part, of course, have already seen that the Single-Use Plastic Directive was a catalyst that triggered a lot of collaboration in our sector to improve our performance in the area. So we are having a lot of innovation in the pipeline, and we hope that on the other hand, we will be less dependent on plastics in the future for our packaging, but also that for the short term, this guidance document will give us a good and fair outcome on how to work with plastics. That's important because it has wider implications than just the plastics Single-Use Plastics Directive, because it can be used in also in the plastic stacks that will be probably agreed on this weekend in the summit of the EU heads of states, and in the extended producer responsibility schemes. And of course, this is foundational work for the future EU legislation. So the amount of paper and board articles that could be impacted with this guidance is actually much wider than just the Single-Use Plastics Directive. Now I would like to hand over the floor to my colleague Bernard. And let me see that we have the picture correct.
Good morning, everybody. So Bernard Lombard, I'm very happy to be with you this morning. And I will bring you through the key stats. Don't worry, I'm not intending to, let's say, go page after page, because all in all, on this, it's about 100 pages or something like this. And you will find a lot of data on all kinds of things: production, raw materials, energy, environment, even social aspects. And here you see a list of, let's say, the reports we produce with Ariane Krefker, with the statistics manager, and Mariuka, who is also working on these stats. So it's quite a lot of statistics and reports, and you can find a list here. You have the link if you want to have a look at it. Maybe a first word about our stats. Yori explained why we have been working on these statistics and developing them along the years. The first thing is, of course, that you have to understand that the statistics are not coming from somewhere in the air. It's solid figures coming from the companies. They are collected through the national associations. And when needed, we complement them with some other sources. We have some strategy to further increase the quality, the robustness, the relevance of our statistics. So it's a 3-year plan. And of course, we have an auditing body which is checking periodically the process and the quality. And of course, it's number one, we have to secure the compliance with the EU competition rules. And this is something we assess periodically as well. Well, if you look at 2019, it's interesting to see that already last year we had, let's say, a decline, and it's really related to the economic slowdown. When you look at the figures, I mean, the GDP in the EU started to decline more or less after the first quarter. And of course, it has impacted the paper and board markets and the production. So you see some figures here. Minus 3.1% for production, minus 3.4% for consumption. In contrast, it's quite interesting to see that market pulp production has been very dynamic. And well, if you follow quite closely our industry, there's been some massive investments in new capacities producing pulp, but also other bio-based products. And we talked about biorefineries. And it's also thanks to the growing export market demand. And here it has been quite amazing to see how these exports have grown in 2019, close to 50%, and mainly to Asia, and I can come back to this later. So all in all, I mean, in this difficult context, the paper industry has delivered on its competitiveness and sustainability agenda, and I will show you a few figures about it. Maybe before we go further into the presentation, I can also give you a few hints about 2020 and 2021. That's the last summer economic forecast from the EU Commission. So it was produced in July, And you see that, of course, 2020 will be a very difficult year for the whole economy and the manufacturing industry as total. Well, I said that, I mean, the industry is delivering on its sustainability, let's say, journey, and you see some figures here. On top, you have the line with paper and board and market pulp production. So paper and board went down in I see 2018, but 2019 we have market pulp increasing, paper and board decreasing, but all in all it remains quite high. And then this interesting thing is to see that the CO2 emission is further decreasing, which is quite logical because of the crisis and the production decline. But when you look at the emissions per ton of product, I mean, it's further decreasing. You might say 1% is not a lot, but every percentage point we achieve is remarkable, because the further you go, the more difficult it is. And it's the result of investments. Something I would like to insist on, and we often say, hey, it's a made in Europe industry. When you look at wood, more than 84% of the wood we use in Europe is coming from Europe. And of course, that we pay a lot of attention, our industry pay a lot of attention to certification and the sustainability of the resourcing, of the sourcing. On the next one, yep, I will. Yeah, on the next one you will see recycling, and I hand over to Ulrich, who is close to us. Ulrich, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Ulrich Leberle. I'm the raw materials director in Cepi. So looking at the inputs of our industry, which is wood and the paper for recycling that you all collect from households, but also from industry and shops and so forth. And with the second head, I'm also the secretary of the European Paper Recycling Council. Sepi is in the center of this value chain, where we work together with paper converters, producers of adhesives and inks, to further increase paper recycling in Europe. And next one, please. So this is first of all a picture of our contributions, of the paper industry contribution in this, where we follow the utilization of paper for recycling in the European paper industry. And this rate of utilization has further increased in 2019. And so 54.6% of the paper that is produced by the European paper industry is based on the utilization of paper for recycling. So this is quite remarkable, and that reflects then also further progress in the recycling rate, to which we come on the next chart. Yeah, please. So here, this is the recycling rate. So here we compare the paper and board consumption in Europe, so with what is then recycled in paper mills. And so out of 100 tons that are paper and board consumed in Europe, 72% would be back in paper recycling. And here, so we talk really about the paper that is collected and recycled back in the paper mills. Often you get a question whether this includes energy consumption, whether this includes uses of paper outside the industry for insulation material or others. No, this is just coming back into the paper industry. And if you translate that into the number of loops, because we talk of the circular economy, that means that on average every paper is doing 3.6 loops in the year. So that is a direct translation of this paper recycling. You see why has it further increased? That is often the recycling takes place more in Europe. So and recycling in other countries outside Europe has decreased, and that has mainly to do with Chinese policy. China has declared to be more independent from waste imports, and China has for a long time been the main importer of European paper for recycling, and that has drastically reduced. So today there is only 12% of the paper that is collected in Europe is leaving Europe for recycling in paper mills outside. So that is what you see on the little yellow bar that is going out for recycling outside Europe. The orange bar is what is coming back into paper mills in our industry in Europe. And so that has performed very strongly. At the same time, as Bernard already mentioned, paper consumption in Europe has decreased a little bit, while more of that has been collected for recycling, and that increased the paper recycling rate in 2019. And more explanations of how this has been achieved with the partners in the value chain in the European Recycling Council, with actions on collection, with actions on eco-design, on education and information, will be published in our yearly monitoring report in September.
Thank you, Ulrich. With that, we will go back to Bernard, who will give you this overview on how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted our sector. So Bernard, back to you.
Thank you, Jori. So, of course, 2019 is interesting, but what is important for us, of course, is to update you about 2020, where we are. And well, our sector, like all kind of sectors and individuals, we have been through a difficult period. And what is clear is that our industry and our product have emerged as, or has been, let's say, more and more considered as an essential sector. And it is reflected by the need for hygiene, health, and food purposes from the population. And our priority has been really to ensure that the citizens can access the products they need for all these ends. What I can say is that, of course, we have had to work along the value chain to secure the supply of these goods and work as much as possible in business as usual mode. Well, probably no need to mention the tissue and hygiene products that are of vital importance for the citizens. Fiber-based packaging, we already touched about it, but they are essential to secure that there is a good transport and delivery of all type of goods to everybody. And in many sectors in Europe, officially the pulp and paper sectors has been considered as an essential sector.
And by the way, many companies also started production of these protective materials that were of shortage in Europe.
Indeed. So, of course, as far as the industry and the plants are concerned, safety of the staff has been a top priority. And it's the safety of the employees, but also the transport operators, the customers. So it's really some cooperation along the chain. What is quite remarkable is that most of the pulp and paper mills have been running through the crisis. Some have been experiencing some temporary closures, and you can understand because of the lack of workers and all the situation we have all experienced. And there's been a lot of information provided to the employees. And for example, it was quite interesting at some point of time, some people didn't know whether they were allowed to go to work. So here the information was, in terms of flows, have been very important. And there have been some very active dialogue with trade unions to secure that there is strict safety measures and also to adjust the work regulation to the new situation. It has been also interesting to see that well, because member states have not been impacted the same way, and measures have differed quite substantially from one country to another. The end of the lockdown has been quite sometimes difficult for companies operating in all countries to adjust to. And of course, well, as you can imagine, and when you look at the figures for 2020 in terms of GDP, there is some concerns about the coming months and the paper and board demand. Here you see a chart showing what we have seen over the first 5 months. Well, March, April, it was starting, let's say, of the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. But as we said already in 2019, we had a decline in the production of paper and board because of the GDP, let's say, slowing down. So for the first 5 months of 2020, there is a decline of 4.5%. And so on the next slide, I will show you a little bit figures, and sorry, it might be a bit small font on the screen, but the figures are available. So what you see is that all in all, packaging and hygiene papers are doing relatively well compared to other sectors. And that's related to the features of these products and the need we have in our daily life. Graphic paper is, of course, severely impacted, and it's a bit like the crisis in 2008, 2009. It's accelerating, let's say, the structural, development. It's interesting also to see that specialty paper and board, and we have been working a lot on this, and you can find a lot of figures on this in our annual stats reports. There has been some heterogeneous developments depending on the end markets. Well, I would like just to end this slide with a remark that, well, we know this crisis will accelerate some consumption patterns. We have all experienced this teleworking mode, further digitalization, sorry. And of course, I mean, it's not here for a couple of months, it's here to stay. So we will have, like all sectors, to adjust to this normal. Well, a few words about pulp, market pulp. Interesting to see that it was a bit of a different trend, and I don't want to spend too much time here, but what was quite interesting is that market pulp exports have been booming last year, and it has been helping quite a lot market pulp production over the first 5 months, because there is only a decline of 1%, which is, given the context, quite remarkable. Now, when you look at manufacturing industry as such, I just wanted to put on one chart, well, first pulp and paper, but also the customers' activity in corrugated, in sanitary and household products, the whole manufacturing industries, but also the printing industry. Well, if you look at manufacturing industry as a whole, you see that over the last 4 or 5 months, I mean, we have a decline of 20% for the manufacturing industry. I mean, we have not seen that, of course, for many decades. I was talking with some sectors in metals, steel, and so on, and they are talking about -40%, -50%. So with -5% or something like this for paper and board, I think we are doing quite well. Maybe a word about the supply chain, because as you can imagine, I mean, it has not been an easy thing to manage. And the first thing was really about the paper for recycling availability. And first, it was impacted by the lower collection. You can imagine, I mean, the absence of workforce first, a reduction of collection, let's say, rounds, sanitary measures. So that was the main reason for the impact on the availability at the beginning. And then, well, now it's the second stage, if I may say so. It's the lower generation of paper for recycling, because, I mean, the economic slowdown is there. And, well, step by step, we see, of course, hotel, restaurant, shops reopening, and of course it will have a more favorable impact on the paper for recycling availability. We had also, when it comes to wood availability, some disturbance in some countries, and as it's clearly explained in the report, well, we are depending a lot on sawmill residues and the chips for the production of pulp and paper. So the sawmills activity has been impacted by the crisis, and so let's say the supply of wood to our industry. I don't want to elaborate too much, but as you can imagine, transport logistics has been also heavily impacted by the crisis. Crossing the border has been a nightmare at the beginning. There was also lack of drivers, containers on the oceans, but well, step by step, the situation has gradually improved, and now we are back to normal. Sorry, I was a bit maybe too long, but that's to give you a complete overview of the situation.
Thank you, Bernard. Now I think we can give you the opportunity for asking your questions. I'm sure you have many questions to ask, and we are happy to answer. Who wants to start?
Can I start?
Please do.
Well, my name is Bernd Hecht of Euwid Pulp and Paper. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for your report. I'm especially interested in well, the present situation in the COVID-19 situation, and we see let's say different developments in the different sectors of the European paper industry. On the one hand, we have the printing and writing paper industry, and the other one is packaging, where the situation is, as we can see it, different. My question is, what do you expect to be the market for graphic paper, printing and writing paper this year, and packaging paper in terms of market size or production?
Okay, thank you. I will take this question, well, maybe first by saying that we don't make any forecasts, so you might be a bit disappointed, but you won't find in our reports or press release any forecasts for the year. But I mean, it's quite clear that the crisis is there. It's a long-lasting crisis. Probably for a few years we will have a slow economy growth. It's very true that graphic paper is severely impacted, and that I think it's just accelerating the structural trend we have seen over the years. I mean, we go more and more for digitalization. I mean, the consumption of communication document, the printing and all this, I mean, is affected by teleworking, for instance. If people stay more at home, they will probably, as we have seen, order more and more things through the internet, Amazon, and so on. And it has an impact on packaging also. I think there will be also some kind of substitution between different kinds of packaging materials, so carton board, corrugated materials. So it's a bit difficult to answer this. It's also interesting to look at the hygiene papers. I mean, what we have seen during the crisis is that, well, you have the at-home market that is been quite dynamic, and sometimes with some irrational, let's say, behaviors. And I'm not a psychologist here, so I won't try to explain. And the away from home markets. Well, if people don't go to the restaurant anymore, or if it's more difficult, or you don't consume things on the go, well, it has also an impact. So I think there is an impact, of course, with a different intensity on different segments of the industry, but also within the packaging family or within the graphic paper family, we will see different developments. Sorry not to be more precise than this.
Like Bernard said, we don't do forecasting, so the only thing we can see indeed is this acceleration of the underlying trend that was there before the crisis. For example, for this graphic paper, there was decades-long discussions about the paperless offices, but now finally, when there's officeless people, it seems to be hitting home. And similarly, the trend in e-commerce was already, of course, strong before the crisis, but it just accelerates. And you all understand that for different retail channels, you need to have different kind of packaging. So that will influence our sector as well, and mostly positive. So these are important. So the underlying trends in consumption, the underlying trends in production and retail will only be accelerated, and that will have an impact. And 1 year from now, we will tell you what happens.
Maybe what I can add is that, I mean, the crisis, the current crisis, is not, let's say, slowing down the need for sustainable products. So we have described quite a lot the features of our products, and I think the sustainability requirements are there to stay. And well, I think it will benefit to our products.
Okay, next question, please.
Hi, Mark Rushton here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, hi, from Paper 360 magazine. Single-use plastics directives. Are there ways around this? For instance, more biologic, more sort of plastics that biodegrade, that type of thing. Is there a way around the directive there?
For the moment, the directive is very clear that the plastics will be dealt the same if it's biogenic or fossil-based plastics, if it biodegrades or not. I think partly it's because the plastics industry for many years was sort of using the language quite loosely by talking about bioplastics, and people thought that it's all good and fine. So now the Commission was appalled to understand that some plastics indeed were biogenic, but not biodegradable in nature. Some plastics were fossil-based and claimed to be biodegradable, but not in the natural circumstances, which people didn't understand. And of course, the fact that plastics were so lowly recycled, that was then triggering the big impact on having the littering or the leaking the nature. So any plastics will be dealt the same. So that's the starting point. What we see in our sector is a lot of innovation. We have also this for evergreen projects where we work with the whole value chain together to solve issues. First of all, to make sure that every packaging or food service material we put on the market is recyclable. There's a collection and sorting system for it, and there's recycling capacity for it so that it gets effectively recycled. So that's a tall order, but we are happy to raise the bar together with our value chain to get there. The second thing is, of course, that we see a lot of innovation where new barrier materials are entering the market that will not have the same problems as classic plastics have. And of course, derivatives made of plastic, cellulose will be important element in that I can imagine. But as these are in the pipeline, we don't of course have full information about that. But I saw 3 days ago that the Johnny Walker whiskey announced that they are going for paper bottles so that people can recycle the bottles at home. And they claim that they use a resin that is not plastics and can be recycled easily. So this kind of innovations and market developments are of course something that we see happening more and more increasingly. And then this situation we might have with single-use plastics directive, I think it's a temporary thing. And then soon enough we will be out of trouble because we have these innovations in the market.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Can I go into detail in one of your remarks, please? This is again Bernd Hecht of Euvid Pulp and Paper.
Please do.
Please, you told that during the Corona crisis, there are movements in the packaging sector, and there is substitution going on of one packaging paper and board packaging material by another. Have you more details on that? What is going on precisely there?
You want to show again the
Yeah, I mean, well, we could go back indeed to the, let's say, the slide with the paper and board grade. So it's slide 25. So yeah, if you can see the screen, what we see here is that you see we have production of case materials that are plus 2.3%. So it's first 5 months compared to the first 5 months, 2020 compared to 2029. Cartonboard plus 2.8%, wrappings minus 4%. And of course, I mean, all this has to be considered with the end markets. Well, wrappings, you have to think also about, I don't know, the sandwiches, the thing like this, the fruits, the vegetables you buy on the markets, this kind of stuff. But you have also the building sector. So you see, I think all in all, cosmetic cotton board, yeah, are doing quite well. Wrappings, it really depends on the end products you consider. And well, that's the first 5 months. Well, it's difficult to say that we are fully back to a normal situation. Well, it's a new normal situation. So we will see how things develop, and you know, all this is also linked to possible new lockdown and this kind of development. So it's difficult to predict here.
What I think that the COVID crisis highlighted is that our sector is very resilient. So since we are not depending on components coming from China, but we are mostly sourced from Europe and recycled in Europe, and the whole value chain is very much European, we were able to continue despite these challenges we had, like Bernard mentioned, that sometimes, of course, the workers were not available because of the crisis. We actually wrote more letters to the European Commission during the crisis than I think we have usually done in a decade. And then we managed to trigger some very positive developments in the Commission in the early days of the crisis that were benefiting not only us, but also the European economy as a whole. So first of all, we started spontaneously reporting on the problems and the situation in our sector Commission, which triggered them to then develop this kind of regular reporting from all the sectors in the EU Commission. That was positive because then they were able to understand what's going on. And now this next weekend, the EU summit, when they will decide something about these recovery funds, that is actually the foundation on this funding the EU economy to recover, is in the fact that the Commission were early on aware of what's happening and what's the impact on the EU economy. And I would hope that it was indeed Cepi that triggered that happening in the Commission. The second thing we triggered in the EU Commission was that we highlighted the importance of hygiene paper, packaging materials, packaging for food and pharmaceuticals, and of course the pulp transports that need to be happening to make all this production going on in all of the European countries. We said that despite the fact that you have to close the borders for people crossing, the goods have to cross. And then again, early on, the Commission then devised these green lanes, which allowed any goods to pass. And then I think that was very successful task that the Commission took, that they really called the governments. They put the Commissioner Breton on the phone to tell the governments that you have to allow the goods to pass. And this was vital for all the countries, of course. And the second, maybe, or third, actually, thing that we triggered was that we highlighted the need to continue collecting paper for recycling, because that's a critical raw material for, in particular, for packaging area in our sector. And then that then was picked up by the Commission, and they sent letters to the governments to say that there's no particular risk for collecting paper for recycling, and it's essential raw material for packaging. So those things, I think, are good things that we managed to do as Cepi on behalf of our sector, but like I said, also impacting beyond our sector. Any other questions?
I know it's a boring subject, but sorry, Mark Rushton again. Brexit, how's talks going? What's it like from the pulp and paper industry point of view?
Again, it's Bernard is your man on this.
Well, I think everybody's on Brexit and nobody's on Brexit anymore. Well, we try to follow the discussion, of course. We inform our companies about the developments. Well, like everybody, we follow the negotiation. And recently, I mean, I saw some analysis saying, well, there is maybe what, 60% or 2 chance out of 3 that there is a no deal by the end of the year. So you can imagine that in this context, with a high level of uncertainty, we need our companies to be ready to adapt to what is coming in a few months' time. And there's been a lot of documentation produced by the EU Commission so that companies can get prepared for this situation. A couple of days ago, there was some documents also produced by the UK government talking about the border controls. And for sure, it will have an impact on companies, on transport. There will be, I think, quite a lot of time to be needed for the goods, the raw materials to be, let's say, sent to the UK or coming into on the continent. I mean, as you know, paper for recycling is a lot. There is a lot of volumes coming from the UK to the continent, while we are exporting a lot of paper and board and pulp to the UK. So there will be a cost for sure. We have to adjust to this situation, and we hope that at the end our governments will trigger a satisfactory agreement. But we are, of course, pushing for this.
And I would add that it would be better to have a not satisfactory deal rather than having no deal at all, because if you have a deal, it means that there's a structure that brings the two parties to the same table later on. If you depart with no deal, then there's no guarantee when we come back to the table. But having a bad deal or less satisfactory deal would be better, because it implies that you continue having a dialogue, you continue discussing and solving issues together. So I think that would be still ideal to have a deal, any kind of deal, rather than having no deal at all.
Sure. Thanks for
Another
that.
boring or exciting questions. We also have it makes exciting. Please.
Yes, I have a question coming back to the dialogue that you have with the EU Commission about the non-risk of the paper products. What about the newspaper and books? Did you give an input so that the newspaper is not cannot have the virus on it?
To inform them that there's less risk on a paper substrate.
Yes, a paper less risk than a keyboard, for example, or I mean, there was a fear from the consumers, the readers, that the newspaper could have the virus on it, and there has been studies that show that it's not a risk.
Yes, exactly. So quite early on in the COVID days, there was this study published that compared various substrates or materials and how long they can keep the virus alive. And of course, paper and board in that is coming quite well. So it's not very favorable substrate to hold the virus as a contamination. So we did inform the Commission about that, and in particular when it was about the collecting of paper for recycling. But of course, it goes, like you say, also for media as well, and that's good news.
It's a good news. And also, do you have knowledge about studies about how to produce newspapers or books with something inside the paper to kill the virus?
Well, you could have antimicrobial or antibiotic materials added to paper, but usually we don't do that, because what is already good about paper is that it's porous and it's dry. So that seems to be something that the virus doesn't like. So the virus needs humidity and low temperatures. So paper is warm and porous, so it's not a good environment for the virus to survive. So on its own, it's like this. Then we know that cellulose has mild antibiocidal effect on its own. So that's probably because the trees have to also survive in the jungle. So we don't need to add anything to the paper as such. And that would complicate the regulatory framework, of course, hugely if we would make active antibiocidal functions to the paper. It can be done for particular applications, but for books and newspapers, that would be too complicated, and I don't think it's needed. Any other questions? I see that we are at the time of the finishing time, but if you want, we can still take one or 2 questions more. I don't know if Roberto, we have muted you, or did you mute yourself? But if you wanted to ask something, it's possible. Sorry for having muted you. I think at some point your dogs were barking very loud.
No, I'm fine. I think I received all the information I needed, and the debate was definitely interesting. So I'm fine. I'm fine. I do thank you very much.
Good.
It was an interesting opportunity.
Thank you. And if there were anybody who missed at the beginning, we will send you a press release at noon, together with a link to this key statistics report. And then once the YouTube has cleared our video of this press conference, that will become available as well later in the afternoon as a recording of this. Is there something else, Claire, that we are? That's all. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.